Hello, everyone. Welcome to the College Football Playbook Podcast. I'm Marc Givler, joined by Tyler Shoemaker. We are down to our last Power 5 conference preview. We're doing the ACC, last but not least. We kind of laughed about this the other day when we recorded the Pac-12, but sure enough, that's going to be our last Pac-12 preview. It was a little foreshadowing, I guess, when we were saying this might be the last time we do this, and kind of how unfortunate it was that in its possibly its last season, it's actually got a very strong league. So that's happened now. So I guess RIP Pac-12 before we get started. If you take a moment of silence if you need to. But on to the ACC. We're going to throw up, and we're also throwing Notre Dame into this as well. So ACC and Notre Dame. Let's start with the main graphic here, which is your rankings in order. Clemson, Florida State, Notre Dame, North Carolina, Louisville, Wake Forest, Miami, NC State, Syracuse, Pitt, Duke, NC State, Georgia Tech, Virginia, and Boston College from best to worst, I guess, however you want to put it. Jeff Hafley at the bottom after, kind of coming out of the gate strong a couple of years ago. What on earth is going on there?
Yeah, I was looking at this earlier in preparation for the show, and I think this might be Jeff Hafley's last season at Boston College, because their trajectory is just not where you would like to see it as a program. So I liked him as a defensive coordinator. I think he's a smart football guy, obviously, but I don't know why he took the Boston College job in the first place, but it has not gone well there, and it is trending in the wrong direction. So, anytime you're below Tony Elliott's Virginia team, you're not doing something right.
Well, I'll tell you why he took the job: money, and because he gets to pocket all that money. If he doesn't do well, they'll have to buy him out. And he's going to get all that money, and he's going to be sitting on his, what was it, $25 million or whatever he signed that contract for. And if it doesn't work, he gets to go right back to being a defensive coordinator, because someone will hire him immediately once he gets fired to be either position coach or even a defensive coordinator because of his ability to recruit, and because he's got a pretty good track record of putting good defenses on the field as a coordinator. So that's why they do it. We can sit back and argue about, well, should they wait for a better job, maybe go on the Luke Fickell plan? And that's ideal. But a lot of these guys, it's like, look, they're going to bang $25-30 million no matter what. And then they can always just go back and either go to Nick Saban's rehab center, or they can, go somewhere else and get a coordinator job and still collect that buyout money. So, but yeah, I agree with you. Pressure's on Hafley this year. A little surprising that, for me at least, that we're at that point already, given how he started. I know that wasn't like all his players. Like, I know he inherited some guys, but he came out of the gates so strong, did very well in the portal. Some of those big hits in the portal have moved on to other schools now. They've reportaled. You lose Zay Flowers now. So there's definitely some issues there. At the end of the day, I think it's a really bad job, though. I think it's not Northwestern bad, but it's close. Like, you can't really recruit your, 150-mile radius. You've got to really go out and try and find guys. It's not a college sports market. No. I mean, I know it's a popular like college hockey town kind of area, but it's not like the Patriots and the Bruins and the Celtics. They're going to dominate the headlines there. It's not a huge alumni base, so the NIL era, that could be a problem as well. It's a tough job, and it's one that again, you almost have to take it with that mindset of, well, I'm going to just bank this money and we'll see what happens. Cause I don't know that you can go there, and I don't think you can win 9 or 10 games there consistently in today's landscape.
I don't think so. Honestly, I kind of look at that hire and that kind of path as similar to like Chris Ash when he took the Rutgers job. Like, go get your money, but like you're not going to be able to build anything sustainable there, I don't think. But not to dedicate too much time of our show here to the bottom dweller of the ACC.
Well, let's switch gears here. Let's go to that top tier here. This Clemson, Florida State, Notre Dame trio, and I guess you could probably maybe throw North Carolina in there. They seem to be a little bit below Notre Dame and closer to Louisville, but those are kind of the big four, I think, in this group that we're talking about here. Is this a big year for Dabo? Because I don't want to say like he's lost his touch. I think that'd be going too far, but there are questions about him and his program that didn't exist like 2 years ago. And I think it's a big year. He's not going to get fired. He's going to probably be able to coach there until he dies if he wants to. But I think if for Clemson to stay a national contender, a national power, to stay in that conversation, I think they've got to have a big year. I just think they had all that talent on defense, and it didn't translate into big wins the last couple of years. You've lost Trevor Lawrence, so now the whole you don't have Trevor anymore, you don't have Deshaun anymore, you don't have this special quarterback talent anymore. Although I think Cade Klubnik's pretty good, but the DJ experiment didn't go very well. You've got some bad press about maybe the offense and the simplicity of it, and maybe the skill isn't there that was there 5 or 6 years ago. So I think this is a kind of a sneaky important year for him.
I agree. And before I even get into my analysis of their football team, I don't want to say I broke Clemson, but Clemson hasn't been the same since I played Dabo's team in my rec league championship and beat them by 40 and crossed him over. Since that moment in the spring of 2021, they have not been the same. So I just wanted to throw that out there. But
hang on, you played pickup basketball or rec league ball against Dabo?
Yes. And I've played his sons multiple times because people don't know I'm in Greenville, South Carolina. So we run into those guys quite a bit. They're a good group of guys.
Can Dabo play?
I mean, to be 50 something like
his age.
Yeah, I mean, because our team, like I said, they made the championship, and our team is like all basically former college players or college level players. So I mean, he's out there running around with us, and he can play a little bit.
I'm guessing the kids are good athletes. I'm guessing
Oh yeah. Well, and it was like his sons and Artavis Scott and like a bunch of old Clemson football players. So
Artavis is athletic.
Yeah. So that was fun. But anyway, no, I think you hit the nail on the head with the quarterback situation, because it was kind of like after Deshaun, he had the year of Kelly Bryant where like they made the playoff but kind of got ran off the field in the semifinal. And then, okay, here comes Trevor. And now he's saved again for 2 years. And then in the 2 years since Trevor's been gone, it hasn't worked out. And I don't want to judge Cade Klubnik yet, but we saw him play against Tennessee, who by most counts, including, the TSI, did not have a great defense last year. And, Clemson ran off the field in that game. So we'll see. I do think, to your point, I think this is a huge year for him. I do really like the ruthlessness of him to go out and get Garrett Riley as offensive coordinator, because, Dabo's kind of tended to keep things in-house and that family atmosphere. And similar to how kind of, I think, Ryan Day to an extent gets criticized for being too loyal, or, Urban Meyer kind of got the same thing, too loyal. Like how ruthless are you? And I thought it was a ruthless move for Dabo to go get Garrett Riley and let go of his longtime guy, Brandon Streeter, who was only the OC for 2 years, but had been with the program for a while. So I like that move. I'm curious to see how it plays out.
And that was kind of my next point I wanted to get into, is like how much of this is Dabo and how much of this was just, and obviously the buck stops with him no matter what, but I don't know that much has changed with Dabo. I think when you have success, you lose assistants. And I think one of the hardest things to do is to, be able to continue to have 8, 10, 12 years of success when you're constantly going to be turning over your assistant coaching staff. I think he made some, I don't want to say lazy hires, but he made some easy hires versus doing the hard thing. And I think that's probably the biggest cause of what's happened the last couple of years. And it's not like they're terrible now. I mean, they just haven't been as good as they were, 3-4 years ago. And so I think this could get them back on the right track. I agree with you. We'll see. It's a big year for them though. just the way like Georgia, of course, Georgia, Alabama now, the way Georgia's recruiting right now, if you're in the Southeast, you need that Atlanta area talent, you need the Florida talent, like the way Georgia and Alabama are doing things right now. Clemson's got to, to keep up, they've got to start, getting back to making the playoff and all that. So
yeah,
we will see. I like Cade Klubnik. If back-to-back DJ and Cade Klubnik don't work out, that's a little alarming for me. From a development standpoint. So we'll see. I liked Cade quite a bit coming out of high school. So, and he's a smart, tough kid. So we will see how that goes. Florida State is like a popular sleeper pick this year for like playoffs, ACC title, of course, but even like a dark horse, like national title contender. I think people like kind of the odds they're getting on that. They had a good year last year. Is this premature? Do they take a step back this year, or do you see that progression continuing? Are they a playoff contender? Kind of how do you view them in all of this?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I've got them second in the conference, but what kind of jumps out to me about the conference as a whole is Clemson is the number one rated team in the ACC, but I've only got them 9th overall. So, I mean, the ACC's barely got a team in the top 10, Florida State being 12th overall. I don't, the numbers just don't project them to be at that elite level. So do I think Florida State could make the playoff this year? Yeah, I think that's certainly possible. I don't know that they're quite at that tier where they could go into the playoff and like make a run. I don't see it. I do really like Jordan Travis though. I was kind of early on his bandwagon last year. I think I tweeted once and called him, I forget which game it was, but he was just going crazy with his legs. And I called him East Coast Caleb Williams and took a little bit of heat for that. But I think he can play. I mean, they can run the ball. The receivers are good. I think they're going to have a good year. But they're kind of one of those teams. They're kind of like, I don't know, Iowa State or something from a few years ago where everyone's like, all right, this is the year. They're going to do it. And again, like we've talked about with some other teams on our other previews, my numbers, like you kind of have had to at least show something along the way, earn some benefit of the doubt, and they just haven't. So I was kind of cautiously, conservative with their rating here. I think a lot of people might have them rated higher, but I am kind of in wait and see mode. But if they go on a run and win the ACC, I certainly won't be surprised, but I think that's probably their ceiling.
Now, is it offense holding back, defense? What's holding them back from maybe getting into that top 10 or even, if we're talking about a playoff team, top 5?
Yeah, I mean, they project to be pretty good. I mean, about a touchdown better than average on both sides of the ball. So, I mean, they're pretty balanced in that way. But I had tweeted a couple of weeks ago doing my historical ratings. One thing that I had kind of dug up was that since 1990, the average college football champion had an offensive rating of 46. Florida State's offensive rating is like right at 37. So they're about 9 points below that like championship caliber offense. Again, maybe Jordan Travis goes crazy. Johnny Wilson goes crazy. I'll be quick to adjust those numbers, but as it projects here, in early August, that's where they are. They're not quite at that championship level offense.
And that's kind of interesting to me because I do think the pieces are there. If you say, okay, what do you need in college football to have a great offense? I'd say, well, experience at quarterback, check. What I would consider an elite running back. I think Trey Benson's one of the best, maybe handful of running backs in the country, or at least one of the best handful of draft eligible running backs in the country, especially the way he finished last year. And I would say you need a go-to guy at receiver, and they've got that with Johnny Wilson. So that'll be interesting to me. I go back and forth with them in Clemson because I kind of like what Florida State showed me. Like I kind of like Florida State's trajectory versus Clemson's trajectory, but I'm kind of with you as like, okay, which program's has earned more of a benefit of the doubt over the last 15 years? And it's clearly Clemson. So
yeah,
that's
and that game's at Clemson.
Back on this. Yeah, that's true. So that's maybe holding me back a little bit. I want to throw this back up here. This is the T-Shoe Index for the ACC. It's power ratings, projected win totals, all that good stuff on the screen if you're watching this on YouTube, which actually I recommend, not because we are anything special to look at, but because we are able to show these graphics that, you know, you maybe can't be explained really in audio. But it's interesting to me how much better Clemson and Florida State are than the rest of the league.
Yep.
Especially like a North Carolina who's got a little bit of proof of performance, and someone like Pitt who's also got a little bit of proof of performance over the years. I mean, the gap is just astronomical here. You know, do you really? I mean, Louisville and North Carolina similar. Where is that? I'd like to kind of hear that. North Carolina, Louisville being basically just about identical teams. Is that a strength of schedule thing for one of them, or I guess that doesn't count in your power ratings, does it? So it's only
no strength of schedule is not factored into the rating. That probably was the biggest thing that kind of jumped out at me. You know, like when I ran the numbers and got what I got. Which, I mean, spoiler alert, I'm going to be on Louisville's -7.5 right now versus Georgia Tech in week 1, and I'm all over that. I've already bet that. I was surprised. I did kind of, because I was kind of so taken back by that, I did go look specifically at Louisville and North Carolina, and like that I missed something, you know. And honestly, North Carolina's rating could have been lower. I kind of gave them some benefit of the doubt based on Mac Brown being their coach and
the Drake Maye bump.
Yeah, they got the Drake Maye bump exactly, because I think he is so good, and their offense the last couple of years, you know, even before Drake Maye took over, their offense has kind of earned some benefit of the doubt. Now the question is and has been, are they going to stop anybody? And you know, I've got them projected kind of right at average defense, and I think if they can be an average defense, you know, their offensive rating for me 36. That's probably conservative. I think by the end of the season that'll probably be higher. But based on what we've got to go off of now, that's kind of their starting point. But they got to find a way to get stops. I mean, their games are so fun to watch and like bet on because it's just chaos. I think it was the Appalachian State game last year or 2 years ago that was just a dumpster fire of a game. That was awesome. So they're like one of the more fun teams to watch, and that's kind of you know, my points added metric. I honestly thought about changing that to like the fun metric, because that's essentially what that is. That's kind of how good your offense is and how bad your defense is, and that's kind of the rating you get there with that. That's how many points a team would contribute to a total, and I think North Carolina is generally near the top of that in college football.
I love Drake Maye. Since high school, just been a guy I've been super impressed with, and you know, they've done a good job recruiting on the offensive side of the ball. They've got some good backs. They've recruited a lot of good receivers over the years. They've turned some over to the NFL. Could that catch up to them this year? I don't know. I still think they're gonna be pretty good at the skill spots, but you nailed it. I mean, they got to get stops. I mean, absolutely. Like, I mean, they're like the USC of the East, I guess. It's like if you could just play a little bit of defense, you'd have an unbelievable team. So, you know, we'll see. I got to see it to believe it that Louisville and North Carolina are going to be about the same team this year, but that's why you do the numbers, and that's why the numbers are generally more accurate than the eyeball test. So, what about Louisville, I guess, is propping them up so high? Relatively,
I mean, surprisingly, like obviously they're going through a coaching change, but honestly, in my opinion, I didn't necessarily upgrade them based on their coach, but I think their coach will be an upgrade. I think Jeff Brown will be an upgrade over Scott Satterfield.
Satterfield was going to get fired. That's maybe another show, but like that was the weirdest thing one of the weirdest things the entire offseason for me was Satterfield failing upwards almost to an extent, like just like maybe not failing up. You can argue back and forth about Louisville versus Cincinnati as a, you know, Power 5 versus non-Power 5 at the time. Now, obviously, Cincinnati's in the Big 12, so but I would argue failing upwards. But more so just the life raft that Cincinnati threw him, because he was very, very much on the hot seat. I don't think Louisville fans are unhappy that he took that job. I think there was a lot of people that were very happy he took that.
Yeah, I mean, I would be if I was a Louisville fan. And the thing that is surprising to me, and I didn't, I guess, realize it in real time last year as it was happening, but when I think of Louisville, I think of, kind of like their high flying offenses and Malik Cunningham, and then, obviously like Lamar Jackson and these like fun offenses. But Louisville last year was kind of built on defense, and my numbers really project that again here this year. I've got them about a touchdown above average on the defensive side of the ball. Now their offense only projects to be slightly above average, about a half point to a point above average, but defensively, them being a touchdown above average, in a conference where, again, it's, you got two teams at the top and then everybody else is kind of fighting there in the middle. Like Louisville absolutely could make some noise. Now I don't think they're going to beat Florida State or Clemson, obviously, if it came to it. But as far as one of these middle of the pack kind of fun ACC teams to watch and bet on this year, I think Louisville is definitely right up there.
Well, that's kind of why I wanted you to explain some stuff there, because that's interesting to me that, if their defense is actually going to be that good, and I know you probably gave him a little bit of a benefit of the doubt, but like Braum knows offense. So he will get every ounce of talent they have out of their talent on offense. They're a team that could very well. I thought he overachieved tremendously at Purdue, offensively. And I think he'll do the same at Louisville. So if they do have a steady defense this year, that I guess I can start to see why, between that and the general just conference landscape of no one's like super scary. I guess I could kind of start to see that. But you said Louisville 7.5, minus 7.5 against Georgia Tech.
Yep, that line's actually that line's actually come down. I think there's some sharp money on Georgia Tech, but I don't see it. I've already bet Louisville, so that would be my side. One last note on Louisville before we move on. Again, this isn't factored into their rating, but it is something to keep in mind for them, kind of on their season outlook, or if you're looking at a win total or something like that. Their strength of schedule is really bad. It's actually second worst in the conference behind Boston College. So again, just something to keep in mind there with them, that, even if they're not a great team, if they're, kind of what TSI is projecting here based on their schedule, that translates to quite a few wins. I've got them projected at basically right at 9 wins this year. So soft schedule and, what projects to be a pretty decent team. That's a good recipe.
If you don't have this off the top of your head, we can get back to it here in a minute or two, but do you know what the line in Vegas is for their over-under win total?
I can tell you in just 1 second.
Because that feels like a really big number for your projected wins, and it would surprise me if Vegas had a higher number than that for their over/under. But sometimes I'm surprised. So
yeah, it's 8.5. I've got them again right at 9. So I would definitely be on the over on the season win total there.
Be on the over stuff. I thought it might be even lower. I thought it might be 7.5, 8. But
yeah, and it very well may end up there. I haven't updated my win totals in a couple of weeks just because they don't move super quickly throughout the offseason. But yeah, I mean, I would take it at 8.5. So if you see it lower, certainly something to consider.
Yeah. So then the next team below Louisville, we've talked about the top 5 here. The next team to me below Louisville is really fascinating to me is Wake Forest. So they lose their quarterback. They lose their top receiver. This is not a program, in my opinion, that can afford to lose that type of talent. Where is this? I mean, you've got them ahead of Miami, ahead of Pitt, ahead of, God, how far? We'll get to Virginia Tech in a minute, but Miami and Pitt are, I think, programs that people, Pitt's been fairly consistently solid in that league. I think Miami certainly has some hype around it right now. We'll see if that comes to fruition on the field, but where is this Wake Forest ranking coming from?
Yeah, well, I'm looking here. So their talent rating is relatively low for an FBS team. However, it's also their highest. And again, I do a 4-year weighted recruiting average. This is their highest talent rating in the last 4 years. So while they don't have a ton of talent, their development rating for me is so high that it does kind of give them the benefit of the doubt here. And that's kind of where you see that rating. So, higher than you may have expected coming into this. Their schedule is right at average. I mean, literally an average schedule. So projecting them at 7.3 wins, I don't know that I would necessarily. Let's see what their win total is. I don't think I would want any part of an over. Yeah, their win total over under 6.5.
It's almost a
I would need
though.
I would need to see more product on the field before I would feel comfortable taking an over bet on Wake Forest this year, though. Because while it is great that they have a good development rating for me, like that's also a variable that can not show up, more so than like a talent rating. So their talent's kind of low. They're relying on development. That's kind of a dicey proposition when you're talking about a season win total over.
So kind of in that next group there, I'll throw this back. I'll throw the other slide back up here. That next group there, you've got, Miami and Syracuse and Pittsburgh are kind of your next three. If I throw this one up too. Yep. Miami, Syracuse, and then Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh and Syracuse look like they're neck and neck there. Miami's a fascinating team. I think their fans think they're going to win 10, 11 games this year. I don't know. I mean, they've made some recruiting splashes. They're definitely a team that's been in the news a lot with NIL and everything else. They have experience back quarterback. It was not a good year last year. I don't think. I think people expected more out of their offense last year and didn't get it. How do you evaluate or view Miami coming into this season, and should expectations be a little tempered there? It looks like your ratings say they should be.
Yeah, I think so. Their season win total is 7.5. I've got them at about 7.3 wins. I mean, and just looking through their schedule, I mean, the only games that I would consider really, really like likely or surefire wins almost are Miami of Ohio, Bethune-Cookman, and Temple. And then you've got like Boston College at the end of the year. So, the train could be off the track there by the end of the year, I guess. But Georgia Tech, from a win probability standpoint, Miami's got an 83% chance to win that game right now, according to my numbers. But I mean, I'm not going to be surprised if Brent Pry gets Georgia Tech, going in the right direction. Or not Pry. I think Key is their coach, right? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So I won't be surprised if Georgia Tech beats them. In terms of kind of how their rating shakes out, I mean, offensively, they're average basically and slightly above average defensively. So yeah, anyone expecting a huge turnaround for the U this year, I don't see it.
Okay. Well, I would tend to agree. But it's been I think it's a polarizing team. I think there are people who, are expecting a lot of them this year, and there's people who are almost kind of like, wait till they fall flat on their face. I don't know if I'm in either camp at this point. I'm not convinced it's going to be a 9 or 10 win season there, but here's two interesting like Syracuse and Pitt are interesting to me. First of all, let's start with Pitt just because, what is holding them back? Because they've actually built up maybe some capital on the field. They've been pretty competitive in the ACC the last few years. They have Phil Dracovic coming in at quarterback. Now they lose Israel Abanikanda to the NFL, running a really good running back. They've lost some talented guys on defense, I believe. So where does kind of Pitt fall in the strengths and weaknesses, and why maybe aren't they a little bit higher, just given where they've kind of finished in the league in recent years?
Yeah, I mean, their rating is just under 3 from a power standpoint. Most of that coming on the defensive side of the ball, as you might expect from a Pat Narduzzi team. The offense is just not, I mean, it's barely above average. So and when I say above average, I mean for an FBS team. So that's including Group of Five. They're projected average on the offensive side of the ball. So, and I mean, the weird thing is, like, based on like comments that Pat Narduzzi has made over the years, he kind of, I almost want to say, likes for his offense to be mediocre and to just live defensively. Like, he's got a very old school mentality when it comes to that. And I don't know how well that translates to today's football. Looking at their schedule, I mean, their win total 6.5. I've got them at about 6.3 wins. I mean, there's not a whole lot of guaranteed wins here. I mean, they open with Wofford. That's a win. But I mean, other than that, like, a bad Virginia Tech team on the road and Boston College at home are really the only games that I'd be like, yeah, they're probably going to win those games. Otherwise, I mean, you got a toss up with Duke, a toss up with Syracuse, probably losing to North Carolina, toss up with West Virginia. I mean, it could get off the rails pretty quick for them this year if they don't, learn how to play some offense, I think.
Yeah. Well, the Dracovic situation will be interesting to follow here this year. Had a great year at Boston College a couple of years ago, kind of fizzled out as most players did at that program last year. And he's had some injuries as well. So that'll be interesting. I think that'll be kind of a wild card for their season. And obviously is how quickly he can get up to speed. So Syracuse, I would argue, and there are probably a lot of people who disagree, and maybe Syracuse fans who disagree. I would argue Syracuse is one of the hardest jobs in the country at this point. And I'm a child of the 90s, so I remember Donovan McNabb and Marvin Harris. Like, I remember all these great players they had, but it's just a new era. You've got, like, no media market. Like, there's no talent within, like, 300 miles of your campus. It's a really good academic school. It's a hard place for me, in my opinion, to recruit. I like Dino Babers a lot. I feel like they've started to benefit from being patient, because that's a program where I think you have to be very patient. I don't think you can expect a coach to come in there and just 1 or 2 years set the world on fire. I think you have to give someone 5-6 years. They've been more patient with Babers than most programs would be with a head coach. I love Oronde Gadsden. I think he's a stud. To me, that's a team that I think could continue to take a step. They've got some experience. I think they're well coached. Again, I've been following Dino Babers for a while. I think he's good. I think he's really good. I know other ACC programs may not take Syracuse all that seriously, but I think that's a program that generally overachieves for its talent level. I can see that happening again this year.
Yep. No, you're exactly right. I was just looking that up while you were talking. Their development rating is one of the best in the Power Five. The problem for them is this is also going to be their weakest team from a talent standpoint of the last 4 years. So they don't have a ton to work with from a talent standpoint. But again, to your point, I really like Dino Babers. He's really done well with what he's had. Again, kind of in a no-win situation there in the Northeast. College football just they don't care about it like they do in the Midwest or the Southeast, and that kind of shows. So I mean, the fact that he's had Syracuse even as good as they've been, which is slightly above average, is remarkable.
I mean, here it is. To have them ahead of, and they got to play the game still, of course, but to have them ahead of Pitt, NC State, Virginia Tech, Virginia, and even Georgia Tech, those are all better jobs than Syracuse. Like, I would argue the only jobs below Syracuse on this list are Boston College and maybe Duke. I don't know. Duke historically is not a good football program, but you're at least in an area where there's talent. The talent in North Carolina is improving almost every year. It's one of the fastest growing states. The population shifts and things like that. So we're seeing more and more talent coming out of Charlotte and other areas of North Carolina. I'm down there every spring because there's talent there for recruiting coverage. And so like I said, I would argue the only job that's not that I would put Syracuse even or above that is below them on this list is Boston College. So, they have a better team than, about half a dozen programs that should be better than them in terms of ease of recruiting and everything else. So, hats off to Dino Babers, and we'll see if that continues this year. Where does like NC State go without Devin Leary? They're kind of, you got them like smack average, it looks like, for an FBS school. Probably taking a step back from what people expected out of them the last couple of years. Any hope for them to overachieve here, or is this looking bleak?
Yeah, it's pretty bleak there for the Wolfpack. I'm just looking at their schedule. I mean, their win totals at 6.5. I've got them closer to 5.5. Even like they play Marshall at home, and I've only got them as a 3-point favorite in that game. Like it's probably going to be tough sledding for them this year. They play Notre Dame, got them as a 13-point dog in that game. They play obviously Louisville. They're a 7-point underdog there, 4-point underdog to Duke, 16.5-point underdog to Clemson. I mean, it's going to be rough for the Wolfpack as we sit here in early August.
And before we get to Notre Dame, to go in a little bit more on Notre Dame, sorry, we've talked a little bit about Georgia Tech through talking about some of these other teams. I agree. I think the metrics aren't going to love them yet, but I think they've got the right coach. I think Georgia Tech is going to be one of those teams this year. Probably doesn't win a ton of games, but I think they be one of those teams where a lot of teams are going to be like really glad when that game's over. And they walk out with like a 7 or 10 point win, and they've covered the spread, and they're just happy to get out of there with the win, and didn't think that was going to be quite the dogfight it was. So that's kind of how I view Georgia Tech this year. But what on earth has happened? Virginia has just been an underachiever for seemingly forever now, but like, what has happened to Virginia Tech?
It's mind blowing, especially as I've done, these historic ratings. Virginia Tech, 90s and early 2000s were great, and then it just like goes off a cliff. Their offense is putrid. Their offensive rating is below 21, which again, 27.5 is FBS average. So they're a touchdown worse than average. They took their starting quarterback, Grant Wells, came from Marshall. He wasn't all that great at Marshall. The Marshall fans weren't all that sad to see him go, and he starts for Virginia Tech and wasn't any better there. It's that their offense is very bad. Their defense is slightly below average. They're just kind of a train wreck right now. I don't see it getting any better anytime soon.
I agree. I don't know how they got to this point, but it might be another episode. Notre Dame, we mentioned them briefly, but let's get into that just because we're lumped them in here with the ACC, and then we can wrap this up. You've got them third among ACC schools. Roughly, where are they stacking up nationally? I think you said you got Florida State at 12, so Notre Dame would be what, maybe somewhere in the top 15, like between like 13 and like 16 or something?
Yeah, 14.
Yep. 14? Okay. Just obviously new quarterback. I think they've upgraded at quarterback.
Yep.
I don't love their skill. I don't love their offensive skill. They have some guys they got to replace on defense who could be tough to replace, but they've generally played pretty good defense over the years, and Marcus Freeman does no defense.
Yep.
Where do you see this team? I know that game against Ohio State is going to be huge. Obviously toward the end of September there, going to be a big measuring stick game, but this feels like a team that, probably not a playoff team.
No, not as we sit here now. I've got them projected at 8.7 wins. Their season win total is 8.5. They play a pretty difficult schedule. Obviously they've got the Ohio State game where I've got them projected as a 9-point underdog. I've got them projected as a 4-point underdog at home against USC, and then a 5.5-point underdog at Clemson. So, that's three top 10 teams that they've got to play there, and at least two of them are at home. They do have that going for them, but man, that's that's really tough. And then other than that, I mean, they did get the benefit of playing, they open with Navy in Ireland. I've got them as a 24-point favorite there. Then they play Tennessee State. So, I mean, they should easily open 4-0 before the Ohio State game. And then, we'll see there. I currently give them about a 25% chance to win that game. So we'll see. I do like Marcus Freeman. They ended the season defensively, and the way they were running the ball at the end of the season, they were playing about as well as anyone. They ran Clemson off the field. So we'll see if that kind of continues, if they carry that momentum into 2023, or if it looks more of what it did in the first part of 2022 when they couldn't quite get out of their own way offensively. But to your point, I think Sam Hartman is a major upgrade at quarterback over Tyler Buckner and Drew Pine.
New OC as well.
Yep.
Tommy Rees off Alabama. So that's going to be another interesting thing. I'm not convinced that was a huge downgrade for them either. I'm not convinced that they can't be better offensively from a coordinator perspective. I just don't love their skill talent right now. But, Hartman, may be able to make up for some of that. Should be able to run the ball a little bit. But yeah, it looks like, you're gonna have to beat at least two of Ohio State, Clemson, and USC to get to the playoff. So that's a tall task. So Yep. So we will try not to sneeze. We will be back here soon. We have a group of 5 episode we want to run. We're going to go over some of our top group of 5 teams, maybe some plays there as far as like over under win totals, gambling, things like that. Real quick though, Notre Dame, isn't that one of your favorites for opening? Was it week 0 or whatever it is? Is that one of your favorite plays early in the season? Notre Dame against Navy?
Yep. I've already bet that. I bet Notre Dame minus 19. I would play it up to 21. So if it ticks to 21.5, stay away because key numbers are important. But anything under 21, I would take Notre Dame against Navy.
All right, there you have it. It's a little tip before we sign off here, but appreciate everyone watching, listening. We're going to wrap up. As I said, we're going to wrap up our previews with group of 5 coming shortly. But thanks again for tuning in, and hope you guys enjoyed the show. We will see you next time.